Hello and welcome to this edition of the Grow with Muin podcast. I am your host, Muin Zafar, and today I have with me Trevor Dunbar. Now, Trevor has been a lieutenant firefighter for 13 years in the greater Seattle area. He is a consultant and a public speaker who's actively involved in the community. He is the host of the Outliers Way podcast, and he also holds retreats and masterminds where he acts as a guide and mentor. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Moyen. It's good to be here, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you, my friend. So let's dive straight into it. My first question is about when you were a firefighter. You've been a firefighter for 13 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. So I want to ask. I know there's a lot of stories there, but I want to ask just one story that really stood out for you, where where even you were surprised that wow, this happened, and I mean that in a more positive light.
Yeah.
So yeah, shoot, man.
Yeah. I mean, funny. So in high school, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and when I graduated, I was on my way to the recruiter, and 18. And the traffic was going slow. So I cut over and passed a bunch of semi trucks, and I ended up getting pulled over doing like 30 over the speed limit. And, long story, I ended up never making it to that recruiter. And I kind of convinced myself with that ticket on my record, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. Fast forward 6 months, I ended up having an opportunity to go into the fire department. And I think one of the biggest memories that I have is, I was 18 going into the fire service, and most of the people were older than me. And I had a pretty clear path of what I wanted to do at that time in my life. I wanted to do something that where I felt like I was making a difference, making an impact, but I also loved the challenges. I also loved the idea of solving problems and really making an impact. So I went into the fire service academy and I was 18, and I ended up, it was an 8-week, really difficult process, but I ended up coming out of that with the Bulldog Award, and with the Chiefs Company Award. And I think at an early age, I just really realized that if I focused and dedicated myself towards being tenacious and getting results, that I could accomplish things that I didn't necessarily feel like I was capable of accomplishing per se. And so then over the course of the next 13 years, I ended up being the youngest person hired in our department. I ended up being the youngest person promoted in our department. Wow. And then I also ended up being the youngest person who retired from our department, because I got to a place where I was no longer fulfilled with just, being a lieutenant in the fire department. I had desires that I wanted to go pursue life outside of that normal. So I think the biggest story for me in what I took mostly out of that 13 years, I did a lot of really cool stuff, and there was a lot of really painful times in there as well. But it gave me the confidence to just solve problems and be a critical thinker in every area of my life. And that has served me really well since then, because life has not necessarily just been handed to me on a silver platter. There's been a lot of challenges that I've had to overcome in the process.
Yeah, that's a great story, man. Thank you for sharing. And critical thinking is something that it's a great asset, and something that I think not a lot of people get trained in school. I mean, even though it is a part of the curriculum now, but really it's I find it through my education, it was sort of limiting, that we were focusing on certain things, and you're supposed to think outside inside that certain box, and not really pull the lid and see what's possible. But so
I think part of that too, sorry to interrupt you, is that I think we're still working with the paradigm that there is a box. And so there's some people that are taught to think inside the box, and then you've got a few outliers who have said, hey, let's start thinking outside of the box. I would suggest that there is no box at all. So we should just discontinue the conversation about the box. And instead of being trained to be a critical thinker, we should allow ourselves to be placed into environments that force us to be critical thinkers.
Yeah, I love that. Remove the box altogether. So let's talk about towards the end of your firefighting career, where you said that you were no longer fulfilled. So what were some of the things that were happening at that time in your life where you decided, well, I don't really feel great, or it's not the same anymore? And like, what was that process like? How long did it actually take you to decide to retire? And
Yeah,
yeah.
it was I'd say for about a year. I just, about 15 years ago, I had a perfect life. I owned a small business. It was successful. It was one of the top companies in our niche
Mhm.
in the Northwest. I was a lieutenant in the fire department, working at the busiest station, had a great crew, beautiful wife, 4 kids. I was a leader in my local church, but inside spiritually, I just I just felt empty. There was just something that was unfulfilled. And I was reading through scriptures, and I was reading through history, and I was reading about these really powerful men that seemed to carry the power of God in their life. And I was going to church, and I was just experiencing theology and routine and, just a small thinking in a lot of ways. And I was going through the motions of life. And on the outside, I felt like I should be a lot happier than I was, but I really wanted to pursue the deeper pursuit of what I later realized was the kingdom of God. And it was set apart from any sort of religion, but just understanding our creation and understanding spirituality, and then understanding the power of God. And so that was probably close to a year-long process. And my wife and I were actually on vacation in Hawaii. And the day before we were coming back, I was body surfing, and the wave crashed me against the ground, the sand, and I broke my nose.
Oh.
And so I stood up, and my nose was snapped, pushed over, and I just remember at that moment, I'm like, it's time. And so I actually resigned from the fire department before I went back from vacation. I took some sick leave to take care of my nose, and I retired. I took an early retirement, cashed out early, and about 6 months later, we were living on the other side of the country and started a new venture.
Wow. And I'm sure that was a brave decision, to leave like you said, a great career, and you had a great team. And so did you have when you decided to retire, did you have a plan that, okay, now I'll retire and then I can do this and this, or did you just like, I gotta retire first and then I'll see what happens?
Well, let me put it this way. I thought I had a plan,
Mm.
but like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the nose. Right. So I thought I had a plan. I was pretty invested in real estate at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I had my small business. And so I sold my company, got some money out of that. I was invested in real estate. So money was coming in from that. And then I took some cash out of my retirement.
Mm.
And I had an idea, but shortly after we moved, now I started experiencing supernatural signs and wonders. And there were some really cool things that happened, but within a year, within 18 months of that decision to leave the fire department, we ended up losing everything. And I remember sitting in my driveway early in the morning, the day after Christmas in 2007, as the tow truck was pulling our Land Rover away.
Mm.
And I had 2 weeks to be evicted from our house. And we ended up losing everything, being homeless, being bankrupt, and had to start life all over again. So when you ask if I had a plan, like I thought I had a plan,
Wow.
but I think that the illusion of having a plan and thinking it was ever going to turn out exactly the way I thought it was a limiting belief at that point, because it really took me off guard when we hit such hard times. And that's a long story about how we got to that point. But, I partnered with the wrong people, and I made some decisions that I wasn't qualified to make, and I allowed other people to make decisions for me, and I didn't take responsibility for those things.
Mm.
And so I later learned that, man, take bold risks, but also do research and get educated in the areas that you're going to risk, and make sure that, you count the cost before you go. And so, yeah, man, that was my plan. I kind of rabbit trailed a little bit on there, but
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had a plan. It didn't work.
Wow. That's a hard time, man. I went through, well, my journey is not as hard as yours, but it's still a journey. And I think it started, I was working a 9 to 5. I was working at a bank, and that my daughter was newly born at the time, and I just had this really massive urge to spend some time with her. And then when I started working, I was commuting maybe 3 to 4 hours to work, and I would see her like 1 hour every day, and that would just make me really sad. And so I left that job and I applied to another bank, which was a 20-minute drive. And I got in and I got the job, and I thought, okay, I got this, and everything's working out and this is fine. But I think 3 to 4 or even 5 months into it, I started to feel anxious whenever I would go to work, and I noticed it like whenever I got close to work, I just got this huge case of anxiousness, like, oh man, I gotta do this now. And then one time, I was at the gym and I was running on the treadmill, and I stopped and I sort of laid down and I just started to cry. And it was at that moment, and it's just like your nose breaking moment, that I was like, man, that's it, I have to quit now. And
Yeah.
I absolutely had no plan. I just knew that I need to tell this to my wife. I communicated to her, and she was very supportive, and I'm lucky in that sense. And then I think the next day I just went up to the manager, and I still remember my voice was started shaking because it was I was leaving a sure thing into the unknown and without a plan, and I quit, and started spending some time with my daughter. And I think 3 or 4 months into it, I would just watch her grow. I was just so much in love with her, man. I'm sure you experienced this with your kids,
Yeah.
watching her grow up, and I would just see her, trying to learn new things and do new things, even learning how to walk. She would fall down and she would get frustrated, and she would get back up, month after one, until she finally started to do it. And then I started to think in terms of like, every one of us is born like that, with that spirit, with that fire to keep on trying, even though it may seem impossible.
Yeah.
And then I started wondering the same thing about myself, like, where's my spirit? Why do I give up so easily when this baby right here, she's not giving up? And I
Yeah.
didn't teach her that. She's born with it. And if nobody was born with that same spirit, we'll be living in a world full of crawlers, right?
That's
and then I just started, writing down everything, whenever I saw her do different things. And soon I had like a page full of insights. And I thought, hey, maybe I can write a book about this.
yeah.
And then, 9 months later, I ended up writing a book. I published it. I think it was number one in happiness for about 3 days. Or it came to a bestseller where I could say that it was a bestseller. And I was really happy with that. And then, but it was gone, came and gone just like that, right? And then started another phase. But let's get back to your story. I just wanted to share that with you because,
No, that's
um,
good. Well,
yeah.
I think that even just brings back memories, I mean, I've for probably 20, I don't know, 20, 25 years, I've been a person of faith. And so when you say, do you have a plan? I mean, my plan has always been following what I think God's asking me to do or showing me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a loose plan with everything. But over the years, we've lived in 8 cities in 12 houses.
Wow.
And there's been a lot of times I've made decisions that were fed by our mission statement. So years ago, my wife and I made a family mission statement, and I wrote a personal mission statement. And that has been an anchor for me over the years. And for us, we've known each other for 27 years, I think. Been married, it'll be 23 this summer. And so that mission statement of defining our purpose early on and deciding what we were dedicated to create in our life, the legacy that we wanted to leave behind, how we wanted to raise our kids. We wanted them to be cultured, spirit-led followers of Jesus, but we didn't want them to conform to the limitations of our educational system. We didn't want them to conform to the limitations of what people said they can do. We wanted them to know that they were all geniuses in their own way, and we wanted them to explore that. So I think that, situationally, I haven't always had a plan when I've stepped out to do something. Sometimes I've just made gut decisions that I've known were right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the only person that got to decide whether they were right or not. And I think that was one of the most empowering things for me over the years, is to recognize that I have dominion over my own life. I can choose my own actions. I can choose my thoughts. I can't always choose how things are going to play out, but I can completely choose what choices I make in pursuit of what it is I care about.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful. So let's get back to your story when you said you hit rock bottom, and you were homeless, and your car was being towed away. And so what happened then? How did you sort of get yourself out of that? And what was the process like? What was the thinking like? And was there any tools that you used to really
Yeah.
get? Yeah.
Well, for me, it came down to faith, because at that point, I believed in God, and I had been, I believed in good and evil, and I believed in the supernatural realm, and I felt like I had been following God to that point. And so I felt like I was doing the right things. But when everything came crashing down, I remember sitting in my office one day, and I was just talking out loud to God. I'm like, okay, Lord, like, either I didn't hear you
Mm.
clearly and I've been deceived, and if that's the case, I don't even know where to turn at this point, because that voice, that inner voice that I've come to know, that's all I know. And so if that voice isn't true, then I don't even know where to start. Or I did hear you clearly, and you just knew what I had to go through to perfect me in a way that I could be refined to fulfill my ultimate purpose in life. And so I made a decision that day to recommit myself at a deeper level to the journey of faith, into believing God, and to believing that I was a son of God, and that he had the best intentions for my life. And I just needed to stay on the path. And so I put a stake in the ground, so to speak, that day, and just determined that I'm going to keep pushing through, and I'm going to keep doing what I've always done, which is solve problems and figure things out. And so I think that determination of setting my intention, making it really clear. And I've always kind of lived by this concept that intention plus mechanism equals result. If our intention is clear enough, and we don't allow all of our other competing commitments to get in the way with what we're truly committed to doing, then some sort of an option will always show up to solve that problem. And so it's this unlimited thinking that I began to embrace, and I embraced what I call kingdom resourcefulness. Is that if we were created in the image and likeness of God, that means that we also have been given access to every resource in the kingdom, in the unseen realm and in the seen realm. We just have to become physically, emotionally, spiritually well and whole, and understand my identity is what I needed to understand. And then I began to produce results out of that identity.
And then, so what is the process of becoming physically, mentally, and spiritually well? What does that look like for you?
I think it starts with being reflective and being intellectually honest with ourselves, and like taking an inventory of our life and saying what's working, what's not working, what's missing that can be added, what's cluttering up my life that needs to be taken away. And so I think that being intellectually honest and emotionally honest with ourselves. When I was in the fire department, we saw a lot of really bad things happen. And I disconnected the pain from the reality of what was happening so that I could show up. In fact, when I was 15, I was molested by a friend of the family, and I didn't realize it until 25 years later. But I, at that point, desensitized myself from emotions. So I quit being able to feel pain or pleasure. And in that being desensitized, I actually went completely out of touch with my emotions. I went out of touch with what I was really feeling, or I would shame myself if I was feeling a certain way, rather than digging into that feeling and being honest about it, and then going back to the root of why I was feeling that way. So to me, part of becoming emotionally well is first acknowledging our emotions, and with no judgment and with no shame, but just saying, hey, I feel this way. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. So let me explore why I feel that way. Spiritually well, I think for me, it comes down, got kind of a 4-part framework: purpose, power, provision, practice, that I take people through. But that being spiritually well comes to making a decision about creation and why we're even here,
Mm.
and then understanding that unseen realm and how it affects us in our thoughts and in our daily activities, and then finding a group of people that can support us in that journey, that don't necessarily show up with judgment, but they encourage or inspire or speak into our lives in a way that, or from a perspective that we might not be able to see at that point. And so I think it's a journey. I mean, it's not something that just happens overnight,
Yep.
but diving into, what do you really believe? There's a lot of noise today in culture, and there's a lot of, that's why the Outliers Way, podcast that I do, it's about practicing a Christ-centered life with purpose, power, and provision by challenging the mainstream status quo. We have to question everything in life, and then we have to go find our own truth and make a decision what we're going to believe, and then live into that. And so to me, it's a journey of restoration.
Mm. I think you touched on a very important point there, where that it's it doesn't happen, with a snap in a finger. It's not genie in a bottle. And I think a lot of people sort of expect that from things like, finding out what your purpose is, of clarifying your intention. They think that once that it is, then boom, you're done and you're there. And then a lot of people get disappointed with that expectation. And
Yeah.
I've certainly been there personally. I thought, this book that I was reading, and once I got done with that work, boom, my life will be figured out. But like you said, it's a process and it's a journey, and it's not genie in a bottle, so to speak. But have you experienced that in your own life or with any of your clients, and how do you address that sort of issue?
Well, here's one thing I think is if there was one takeaway from finding your purpose that I would give, is that it takes longer than you expect it to take to discover that purpose. But most of that is simply because of not being healed and whole. And I think that, like most of my clients, most of the people that I've worked with over the years, deep inside, we all know, if we are connected deep inside, we all know that small thing that fires us up, that injustice in the world that just we want to go and solve, that we know that thing. That, and I believe our purpose is deeply connected to that. But because the voices that we listen to are so strong, and because we are all so insecure, because we're all living in a world with everybody's opinions and rejection, and social media has exponentially compounded this, and this microwave, get it now guru culture, where everybody's just, they're telling you how to build multi-million-dollar businesses as they're trying to do it themselves. They haven't even done it. And they're selling you the model that they're making up as they go, right? They just bought this course and now they're going to go and be the expert. And I think that people do that with purpose as well. One thing that I would say for me, if I look back 20 years, the things I'm pursuing and am passionate about and getting powerful results in today, they were the same things that were in my heart 20 years ago. It's just that it took me that long to get confident about what I believed and to form the experience that I needed to be able to fully step into it. So there's an experience element, but I would just encourage anybody, if you've got that thing, when you write down your personal mission statement, or if you're married, your family mission statement, write down those things, those core values, those injustices, how you want to be remembered, and listen to that voice, because that's you, that's inside of you. And then have confidence and boldness and courage to pursue that. And it's out of that conviction early on that purpose will grow. And for some people, they get launched into big platforms early. Purpose isn't always about platform. Purpose is about placement. It's about who are you around, and how are you impacting the world. And, financial security is a big part of that, but impact is an even bigger part of that. And so making sure that it really aligns, and then just trusting yourself, like learning to hear the voice of God for yourself, or whatever you believe in. But hear that voice and trust that voice, and don't doubt it. If you believe it, then do it. Like stick to it and keep taking those steps forward.
Yeah, I love that, man. And You talk about belief, and that's plays such an important part in anything that you're trying to do that's, not conventional.
Yeah,
And I've certainly experienced it, and I've had challenges with it, with even when I was writing my book, there I would hear voices, oh, who's going to read it, why am I doing this, and am I even going to be able to commit to this and complete it?
yeah,
And I think I wrote it was a Will Smith video where he was talking about belief, that before anybody else is going to believe in you, you have to believe in yourself, and
absolutely.
from that belief you'll attract other people who, when they see the work, they will believe in you. But first of all, you have to be your own believer.
And you have to give yourself permission to believe in yourself, because I think everybody is waiting for permission.
Mm-hmm.
And with purpose, everybody's waiting to be validated, but you're not going to be validated for the things that you've been called to do until you start doing them, because you can't attract the people into your life that will validate you. So until you show up powerfully, the people that are supposed to be connected to you will never find you,
Mm-hmm.
because you are like, I have a pretty radical message for some people. Christians are afraid of me because I'm too radical. People who are outside of the faith are skeptical because they associate me with Christianity because I follow Jesus. And so I live in a weird paradox, man.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm realizing is that more I just show up authentically and share that, yeah, I've got people that don't agree with my philosophy. That's fine. But the people who do, they've just been waiting for somebody to show up to speak this way. And that validation never came until I stepped into it. And so step into the place that you feel passionate about and have confidence to be different and to be bold, because it's not about creating a life that other people are happy with. It's about you being true to that voice inside of yourself and then having the confidence. And, I've got 5 keys to effective prayer that have worked for me that might work for some people. Is that first, it's position your heart, remove distractions, expect encounters, believe what you hear, and then take action. And so this is a belief model, because if we start with the place of wholeness, of purity, of, hey, I want to go and discover my truth, my purpose, my destiny. What is it that I'm going to create as a legacy? And my heart is positioned without selfish motives. I've forgiven people. I am coming there with a place of authenticity. And then I put myself in an environment that I'm not distracted by phones and other voices and negativity and toxic thinking. And then expect things to happen audibly or visually or in our senses, or just know something, and then believe it, right? And then go do it. It's the treasuring principles. The more that you take action on the things that you believe, the more conviction you'll get in the things that you believe that will empower you to move forward. It's a compounding strategy. And I think that model of belief has helped me to build my faith over the years, to where I haven't had to explain to anybody why I did what I did. I just knew there were values. Flexibility has been a value. I live in Northwest Montana outside Glacier National Park. We wanted to do that. I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I didn't want to be I didn't want to commute to work. It hasn't been easy, but I have found my own belief in the things that I have found in my prayer time and the convictions that I've lived into. And that's what's allowed us to create a lifestyle that we wanted to create.
Wow, I love what you're saying, man. So it's like, so the people who know that this is there's something that they want to do, they're familiar with the voice. Like, I certainly have friends who say, Moin, I know that I just need to do this one thing and then I can get to this place where I want to get at. But for some reason they're not taking action. Like you
Yeah.
said, taking action is a big part of it. So how do you help someone who's sort of in that space where they know, okay, I need to take this one step, but they're just, for whatever reason it is, they're not taking that first step? What's stopping them, and how can you help someone in that space?
I think 2 ways. One is more of an internal issue working on identity. I think we have an identity crisis in the world today, that our identity has been hijacked. And so we have connected our identity to our bank account, to our Instagram profile, to the amount of followers that we have, to the validation that we get. And so I think that the first step is finding somebody that can help you to embrace your true identity and understand who you are and come to believe who is Moyne? Who am I? Am I created in the image and likeness of God? If I am, then I need to embrace that perfection, and I need to show up in that uniqueness and be confident in who I am, regardless what anybody else says. So I think that's the inner work that needs to happen. But on a more practical level, I'd say that when we're isolated, we don't take steps. And so I would say create a mastermind group where go find 4 or 5 people that are successful in an arena that you want to be successful in, and find a way to provide value for them, and ask them if they would be willing to be in a mastermind group with you for 6 months or for a year, and tell them what your goals are. So if you go to somebody who has achieved success in an area of life, and you show them your life purpose, I've written it down. I've taken the time to write this down. I know this. I've invested in myself. I've read these books. I've listened to these podcasts. I've done this training, and I want to go to the next level, but I need people who are at a higher level to be speaking into my life. If you take that initiative and come to the right people, they'll surround you, and then they'll hold you accountable to actually taking action and doing those things. But I've also spent a lot of time pushing a rope, trying to drag people to success, and you can't drag anybody to success. And so guys who are successful are never going to attach themselves to people who don't want success more than that person wants it for them. And so if I come across people and I can see greatness in them, but they just can't or won't see it in themselves, I don't waste my time with them, because I just don't have the time to spend with people who don't believe in themselves. And it's not that I don't have empathy. It's just that I want to develop leaders, and I don't want to develop followers. I want to develop leaders, and I can't develop leaders unless they start believing in themselves and decide to make bold actions on their own and step into those places that they find fear and embrace it with courage and move forward.
Yeah. Love that. And it comes back to, how much do you really want it, and how clear you are on your intention and your purpose. So I want to talk about, you touched on experiencing some supernatural things. I'm really interested in those. I love those.
Yeah.
So can you share one or two, or how many, as many as you want? Yeah.
Well, the one that, that radically shifted my life shortly after I moved from Washington State to Georgia, I met a couple of spiritual mentors, and they began to teach me a lot about the unseen realm that I never had been taught before. And we actually, 4 of us went up to a cabin in North Georgia mountains, and we were just going there for 24 hours. And we were going there to specifically pray. We had just been in Israel, and we had just been at the Herzliya conference. I got to meet the Prime Minister of Israel, and we were doing some nonprofit work over there. And we were going to kind of debrief that trip, and we were going to go pray for 24 hours. And we get up to this cabin, and we walked into the cabin, and I went downstairs, and I threw my bag down, and I noticed these walking sticks, these like wooden walking sticks that were leaning up against the wall. And we're in the mountains, and so it wasn't unusual. I didn't think anything of it, but I took note that they were there. And then we went upstairs, and we had some worship music playing softly in the background, and we took communion. And we had a bottle of wine, we took communion, and we were just praying quietly. And I heard at the time what I thought was the voice of God, but I was still pretty young in that, I wasn't sure what I was hearing, but I thought it was the voice of the Lord, right? And I heard him say, "Go grab one of those walking sticks." And so I'm like, I open my eyes and look around, and like everybody's just got their eyes closed. I'm thinking, well, I don't know where this thought's coming from, right? And so I go, okay. So I walk downstairs and I grab one of these sticks, and then I just to myself, I say, okay, now what? And I hear this voice again, like this thought. It's not a voice. It's like a thought. I just had this thought. And it said, hold on to it while you guys pray. So I'm like, okay. So I go upstairs and I said, hey guys, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It sounds weird, but I feel like we're supposed to hold on to this stick while we pray.
Okay.
So they're like, all right, well, we're here to pray. So all four of us grab onto this large walking stick. And as soon as we did, a fire supernaturally starts burning in the fireplace.
Wow.
It's like full blow burning. And we look at it and we're like, what? And at that exact moment, my friend Gary, his BlackBerry, probably before your time, his BlackBerry goes off. And there's a text message from a woman that was praying for us. And the text said, the Lord says, expect angelic visitation today. And when we read that and we're looking at this fire, this overwhelming presence, I can't describe it in any way, but like this just weighty supernatural presence came, and we took our shoes off. It was like the burning bush in the Bible with Moses. And so we took our shoes off, and we pounded the staff on the ground 12 times. And I don't know why we did that, but I wrote it in our journal. And interestingly, 12 years later, I'm in Montana and starting retreats. And that same, when I'm praying for people, when I pray for people, it's like an electricity goes through my arm, and there's things that break off of them. And so if people have strongholds emotionally or spiritually, for whatever reason, when we get together and we dive into these things in prayer, and I can put my hand on them, there's an activation that happens. And we've seen people get physically healed. We've seen people get emotionally healed, where their anger goes away. Like they had crazy anger, and just over a prayer session, that anger is gone from them. And so, there's number of different encounters over the past 14 years like that we've had. But that fire starting the first time, the fire burned for about 10 minutes, and then it went out, and we sat down on the couch and we're just still in awe. And I remember Gary said, guys, the most important thing that we can do is learn how to hear God's voice. And when he said that, the fire started again, and then it went out. I'm like, what in the world? Well, I had just retired from the fire department when this happened. So just to kind of, for all the skeptics, because I'm like, okay, I watched this happen, but I'm like, did this really happen? Like, part of me was kind of like, did this really happen? So that next morning before we left, I'm like, I believe this happened, but I'm going to go see if there's any natural way this could have happened, right? So I went over to the fireplace, and it was a propane fireplace. And I went and I looked, and the propane gas was turned off. But I'm like, well, maybe it's broken. So I started lighting it, like clicking the lighter, trying to light it. It wouldn't light. So then I turned on the gas, and then I lit the fire, and it lit normally. But as soon as it did, that smell that you get when you turn on a furnace, or you light a stove the first time in the fall or winter, and it's been sitting all summer, that dust, kind of that dusty, smoky smell. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That smell consumed the inside of the entire cabin immediately when I lit the fire, and we didn't smell it the night before when that fire burned for more than 10 minutes. And so, man, it's just opened my mind to the scientific nature of the unseen realm and quantum physics and all the things that a lot of religious people have set aside. And yet a lot of other people who don't necessarily believe in Jesus or a kingdom of God have tapped into those spiritual encounters as well. The supernatural, I think, is pretty intriguing for a lot of people. I think we were created to be supernatural, and I believe that the power of God is within all of us if we choose to embrace it and choose to live a surrendered life to find it. And so that's a big part. Some of the retreats that we run, they're called dunamis retreats. Dunamis,
where does the name come from? Yeah. Sorry.
Dunamis is a Greek word that means power. It's actually used more than 100 times in the New Testament. When Jesus was speaking to his disciples before he ascended to heaven, he said that they would receive dunamis. They would receive power, which is the Holy Spirit. And so this dunamis power was what raised Jesus from the dead. Dunamis is the ability to create wealth. Dunamis is an inherited power that comes to all of humanity. It's given to us as an inheritance as sons of God. And so this has been a life effort for me, is to understand this dunamis power, this strength, this ability to create and to embrace the power of God in everything that we do in our life. And it's a radical paradigm shift, but we've got so many stories of so many people. We take some really high-powered men out on on retreats every summer out here in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And these guys just get wrecked because they experience things that they've never experienced before. And, high performing producers, wealthy men have fame and they have notoriety, and they get out in the presence of God and they feel these prayers and they can feel things breaking off of them in their soul. And it's just, I don't know, man, it's hard to describe to the person who hasn't experienced it, but it's been a pursuit of mine. And for the past 15 years, we've experienced it on a number of occasions. And, it's pretty unique.
Oh, thank you for sharing that story. I had goosebumps throughout that story. So, and I had good goosebumps through most of our conversation, because you're saying a lot of powerful things. And I just really appreciate you sharing that knowledge here. I've never had something like that happen to me, and I've always been intrigued by the supernatural. I think a lot of people are, and I think my most powerful experiences were within the last, I think, 3 to 5 years, but nothing compared to what you just described.
I would even say this too, like one thing that I've come to believe, when you expect encounters, as spiritual beings, we can encounter the supernatural every day through all of our senses. It's just that most of us aren't tuned into it. And so, I had a fire show up, which is really uncommon. I'm sure it's never going to happen to me again. It's not going to happen to my kids. It's not going to happen to anybody who's listening to this podcast. This was like a weird one-time event that, for whatever reason, whatever purpose God may have had in that, it happened. It's part of my story. But the unseen realm is about finding that inner peace and finding that inner voice and taking the little clues when, you're praying and a bird comes and lands on a tree in front of you, or or a car drives in front of you and it's got a license plate with the number sequence that means something to you. You start picking up some of those little clues, and the more sensitive you become in that spiritual realm, the more you naturally live supernaturally, and you really begin to encounter the supernatural all the time. There's signs and wonders and miracles and a lot of crazy things that can happen, but I think the supernatural is really in the small things. And sometimes it's even in walking up to a person. You don't know why you're drawn to them, but you feel like you're supposed to go say something or give them a word of encouragement. That's a gift that's inside of you that's trying to come out. And that's a gift that was given to you for another person. And I think that when we obey those voices, as I bring to remembrance, I was in Georgia a long time ago. And I remember walking out of a building with a friend, and all of a sudden his face just got flushed, and he opened up his wallet and looked in his wallet, and then he closed his wallet, and I'm like, what's going on? And he took off running across the parking lot. I'm like, what is he doing? And I saw him go talk to a guy in a truck, and then he comes walking back, and I'm like, what was that all about, man? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I just felt like God told me to give that man everything that was in my wallet. And I opened my wallet and there was only $2. And I'm thinking, Lord, I can't give them $2. Like, that's just, shame, imposter syndrome started popping up. Like, what am I going to do giving this guy $2, right? He said, but when he walked up to the truck, he said, hey, man, like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm supposed to give this to you. He hands him $2. And the guy broke down in tears. And he said, you don't know this, but today is my wife's birthday. And she died 6 months ago. Wow. But we had a family tradition that on her birthday, everybody gave her $2. Wow. As a gift. Wow. That's supernatural, dude. Like, if we can trust the voice that's inside of us all the time and step out of our comfort zone, whether it's a big dream or whether it's a $2 moment of somebody being given money. And when we trust those encounters and we trust the authenticity that's coming behind that and the purity that's in that, we can impact people's lives everywhere we go. And it's kind of cliche, but if we can help other people get through the day or to their next goal or objective, ultimately it's that universal law of giving and taking, reaping and sowing, karma, whatever you attach yourself to. But there's a real supernatural arena that we can operate in. It's the unseen stuff that matters, and that's where our place of power really shows up when we begin to embrace that. And we can declutter ourselves from the noise of culture and social media and all the toxic thinking and the self-talk, the negativity that the insecurities that we embrace, and become confident. Hey, if you're a son or a daughter of God, then you've got that dunamis power of God inside of you. Start listening to it.
Mm. That's a beautiful message, man, and I think it's a great way to get to the end of our conversation. So before we go, what's one way people can connect with you? Do you have any retreats coming up soon? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we've got a retreat July, I think 9th through 14th. I just opened applications for that yesterday. We're only accepting 6 men.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a high ticket retreat. We go 5 days pretty deep into the Bob Marshall Wilderness. For anybody on here, I'd like to give just a free masterclass if you're interested. It's that 5 keys to effective prayer. I put together a quick little masterclass. It's really short. It's 2 or 3 minute videos each day, but it just helps people to go through those 5 keys of effective prayer. And you can access that at outliersway.com/wake up. And that'll get you into like a 7 video series. And I think that the key, the most important thing that, in my perspective, that we can do in life is learn to hear God's voice, because that's where that healing is going to come from. That's where that clarity, purpose, all those things come from. And I think that has been mystified in a lot of ways, and it's made to be really complicated. So one of the things I'm passionate about is helping people realize, hey, you can hear God's voice no matter what your belief is today. And no matter what religion you may or may not subscribe to, there's something far deeper than any religion that you can attach yourself to. And it's about creation. And if you can learn to hear that voice. And so that, people can connect with me there. I'm on social media, LinkedIn and Outliers Way on Instagram. So yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation with anybody.
Yeah, awesome. And I gotta say, my intention always is, whenever I bring some guests on, is to inspire just one person, or someone who's listening, or even sometimes the guest who's speaking. They may be inspired. But I just want to say today, you've inspired me, and this conversation, it means a lot to me. So thank you.
I appreciate it, man. I'm really grateful that you had me on, and man, I love what you're doing. I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and you're making a big impact. So keep following that purpose, and you're doing good stuff, man.
All right. Thank you, man. That means a lot. It really does.